there's no one that doesn't have a voice that can't be shared. Everybody's got like a story to tell, and we can all learn from each other.
I've actually recently, we've known each other for donkey's years, right? We met at uni,
Too long.
which is 25 years ago. We came to Manchester for uni. But it's only really recently that we've actually been on a shoot together and stuff. And when I say recently, I mean last week.
Which is mad.
Yeah. But Kaz is one of those people who you look at, especially at work, and you just go, she's doing what she's on the planet for. She's just so, it's not just what she does and how good she is at it, it's how she does it and how she treats other people in that journey. So I'm really, really pleased and excited to introduce you to Kaz. Let's give her a round of applause now, just in case it stinks later. Yeah. And we usually, this runs a little differently. Usually we do some share some stuff from you guys first. We're going to do that at the end this week, just because of some diary clashes and stuff like that. It is what it is. So we're going to dive straight into our conversation. We're going to hear a little bit about Kaz's journey. So Kaz, why don't you start by just describing you and the agency, what it is that you do?
Currently. Okay. Yeah, so we started out as an artist management agency, which we'll delve into later, which is basically looking after other people that do similar things to myself. So I'm a fashion stylist by trade and also do art direction and creative direction. But we also look after photographers, videographers, hair and makeup artists, other stylists, prop stylists, that sort of thing. And then maybe 5-6 years ago, we moved into production as well. Kind of really for the reasons that James has just talked about, why he wants people like you in the room, is that it was great having the people we wanted to have near us and like-minded people that become friends and colleagues, but actually doing production means that you're still then dipping into those that aren't necessarily in your team or your group, and the people that you didn't expect to meet, and the wider circle that maybe don't want to be there every day but are amazing, so you want to dip into them once a month, once a year, once every 25 years. So now we're kind of a hybrid between artist management and creative production.
Cool. And just top tip for anyone interviewing a fashion stylist, just wear black. I went safe. But I'm not devoid of personality, so I've got white trainers. Did you always want to do that?
No. Well, I knew I wanted to be in the arts. I knew I wanted to be creative, but I kind of fell accidentally into fashion. Did design and art direction at uni, and absolutely loved the ideas part of things and making things happen quite quickly. But actually, I was never a flat designer. I was never, I loved design, but just being at a computer didn't serve me. And also being in the same place every day just didn't serve me either. I realised quite quickly I'm stimulated by change and movement and that sort of thing. And then after I graduated, I was doing some work, doing some VMing, which again I kind of fell into, and I ended up
VMing.
Right, so visual merchandising. Sorry, I do that a lot, and I will stop. So I am quite good at chatting. So I worked in Diesel when I was doing my degree, and somehow managed to blag my way onto their kind of, they call it test patrol, but it's like their creative progression stages, and I ended up doing the visual merchandising for them before I'd graduated, and then continued doing that.
Which is
putting together their windows, yeah.
Windows.
But it gave me that first touch of seeing what happened on a shoot, because they the Diesel team were amazing. They took me to Italy. They'd really bring you into the family, and what ended up on the shop floor was the same as what went into their kind of big productions, and that really resonated with me. So I owe a lot to them, really, because they treated the staff on the shop floor the same as they treated the people in head office thousands of miles away. So that was amazing, because I got to do visual merchandising, and from there I went and did a period with Whistles where I headed up their VM team and designed the windows. And at the same time as that, I started putting a book together because I'd done a bit of work in a press office. And I'll basically talk to anybody. And there was a couple of stylists coming in at the time, 2001. I was like, didn't really know, even after doing that degree, what a stylist did. And I was like, it's the ideas and the clothes and the chatting to clients on shoot. I love that. So I went and assisted some in London, and then at the same time was able to put my book together. And I feel really fortunate looking back because I was allowed to write my own schedule when I was doing visual merchandising. So I basically just didn't take a day off. I was really lucky. I could do tests midweek. I could work at the head office in St Christopher's Place at the weekend. So I was quite fortunate. I didn't have much time to myself, but I was really lucky that I was able to do things on quite a quick turnaround, so to speak. Over a couple of years, I'd put together both books, and then I was ready to go freelance.
And then from there, how did it progress?
Then I had what we now do. I had an agent, and they were primarily a model agent. So even now, most creatives are represented by model agencies. So I was under a model agent. I obviously was not a model, but I was doing photographic shoots and film shoots, and I was looked after in Manchester and in London. And I was really lucky. For the first 6-7 years, I was just doing pure fashion styling, mostly some art direction, and got to travel all over the world. And that kind of took me up to the point where we decided to start the agency.
So give us a picture of sort of what clients were you working for back, when you had your agent?
So that I was probably working probably the biggest brands in the world, really. Everything from Nike, Adidas, Under Armour to high street brands, John Lewis, M&S, Next, and then more lifestyle projects as well that were non-fashion related. But I was nearly always pulled in for the fashion side of things. So I was so lucky. I was saying to you before, never did that backpacking thing, and really wished I had. But then weirdly, organically, work took me there. So I got to go, spent lots of time in New York, lots of time in little islands, around the Caribbean, Seychelles, Paris, all sorts of places. Basically, we chased the light. So for the first sort of 10 years, I was away more than I was at home. I was away sort of 30 plus weeks of the year. This point in the year, you'd be in South Africa or Miami. It'd get to the middle part of the year, you'd be in Europe. Get to the latter part of the year, you'd be kind of Caribbean, and you just chase the light around. So I feel, it's not something as a child I experienced. I felt so grateful because it felt like I was this kind of working class girl that had broken into this kind of bubble that was quite a different scene. But that's not the case now. It's so much more, it's so much more accessible because the world's just more accessible, isn't it?
So what was the tipping point that took you from, because you could have stayed on that path.
Yeah.
You had a lot of favour, you were getting recognised both nationally and internationally. You could have become like the star in that sphere, but something made you want to look after.
I love what I do,
creatives.
and I still love being on big sets. And my partner and I, we spent a bit of time in New York together, and I was doing some shoots, and I was toying with the idea of there's a really good agent over there called Streeters, and the only feedback I got on any shoots was that I could do with being a bit more cutthroat. And, I was a bit smiley and I was a bit kind, and we did great shoots, and I got rebooked and all of, but I don't know why it just resonated too hard with me. And Sam had no intention really he didn't really want to live in London, didn't really want to live in New York, and so and at the same time I had a really amazing sort of micro team that kind of started forming around me, an amazing assistant that I'd met actually when I used to lecture at MMU with James, and she'd gone from being a girl that I met at uni that I'd recognised myself in to an assistant to a friend. Now she's more like a sister. In fact, I'm going to be a bridesmaid this year. So it's just, she's still here, and she was really the catalyst, along with the fact that I had this moment where we were in New York, and I still love New York, but together we wanted to be at home. So it felt like, okay, well, if we're not doing this, why don't we start something of our own? And it started with the three of us really, and kind of grew from there.
Amazing. Just to fill you in, Sam, when Kaz refers to partner, it's both partner
Oh yeah, partner and partner.
co-founder,
Yeah.
And met on our course.
Yeah.
What give us a bit of an insight? Like now, where do your clients come from? Like, where's the work come from?
So we were really lucky when we first started, probably out of infancy and scale, as in, what we could actually deliver. We started off just doing the overflow of the clients I had already from, so I noticed a lot when I was with my previous agent was there was lots of jobs I couldn't do. So obviously from a commercial point of view, that was brilliant that we could create a team that then did that overflow work. But we didn't, in all honesty, have to go searching for the work. And, it was only when we kind of hit year 2 or 3, we thought, actually, to grow, we need to sort of go out seeking it. And back then, you were still, you'd like have a book. And, obviously the internet was there, I think, but you'd go out and the book would get biked out to a client, and then you'd go and do a go-see, like a physical go-see. And it was amazing. You'd go knock on doors and you'd meet people, and it was a bit like this room, you'd bounce off this creative director you met, or the guy that opened the door, and then you'd meet them 6 months down the line. So it's always been quite an organic thing where I'm not afraid to pick up a phone and say hello, not afraid to do an email. And it was, I'd love to say there was a strategy, but there wasn't really a strategy at first. It was kind of like, I love you, I'm going to try for you, or I love that brand, I'm going to contact you. And weirdly, they were more accessible, even though everything feels really accessible now with social media. Brands and places were much more accessible because you could phone up and you could say, I'd like this person's email. And if you were articulate and you were polite and you were kind, they'd nearly always give you that information. So that's kind of how we went about it.
Amazing. And that's grown and grown, and you're obviously working with some sort of household brands that we would all recognise. Give us a bit of an insight into your creative process. Obviously, you represent lots of other creatives, but where does it start?
So it depends on my mood, I'll be honest. So I now, current Kaz likes to get outdoors, and I like to take myself away from the so-called creative space where you need to put it down on paper or whatever. And my ideas always flow after I've taken some time in fresh air or in, gallery or a movie. Just I need to lose myself to come back to it. And I always get things down on paper first. I think I'm quite old school in that way. I think I don't really take information in or produce ideas unless I'm scribbling down. I'm quite a writer. I quite like sharing my thoughts, quite into poetry, things like that. So it tends to come out in words, even if it ends up being outfits or creative treatments or whatever. It always starts in words.
Oh, wow. And then expand on that. Where does it go?
So, I mean, now, again, time pressures. I'm quite a lastminute.com kind of person, which serves us quite well in this industry. But it's taken kind of growing up and realising that those things that you used to think were your nemesis when you were at college or uni or whatever actually is probably one of the best things in your armoury, because I'm good at being reactional. I've recognised that I'm good at being spontaneous. I'm not so good when things are really, really planned in. They feel like overwhelming. But if something massive hits me, I'm like, oh, that's fine, I can do that. So yeah, I tend to get ideas down on paper I use, visual aids, but quite often I'll do physical collages. I'll then go off and maybe take some photographs or put little film ideas together and then produce things in a way that feels like I already know what the end product is, and then work back from there.
And that speaks into, like, I was going to ask you a little bit about how, because you've been in the fashion industry for north of 20 years.
Yeah, and yet I still feel 25.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it is weird.
But yeah, like when we graduated, like Facebook didn't exist.
No,
like
which is mad.
Smartphones didn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. So that not only the creative process must have changed, but the fashion landscape itself and the way what have you observed, like, that's different? Have we even come full circle? Like,
I think in some ways we have. Some ways things are exactly the same. You know, trends and things are cyclical for a reason. That, you know, you start off looking forward, and then you have these kind of future trends and ideas, and then you grow and you mature, and you end up looking back, and things that feel nostalgic and feel safe and feel warm become like something that you want to look back to. Like I read something mad the other week where I was like, 1980 is as far away as 1940 was. 1980 for our children is as far away as 1940 was for us, and I was like, that is blew my mind. That felt like that was like ancient history. I was like, God, we're
ancient
old.
history.
We are ancient. But actually, there's some amazing talent coming through. And what I love is lots of the new talent are looking at analog resources and looking at things from a kind of real and like referential point of view, which is so nice, because this kind of instant thing, I think the instant bubble is gone. Like, you know, fashion thing, I hope is going. I really believe in like loving things, and from a fashion point of view, like, you know, my style changes day to day, but because it should be reflective of what makes you feel good that day. Like, I mean, I made the wrong choice this morning. I'm absolutely roasting, but I woke up feeling like I wanted a cuddle, so dressed like I wanted a cuddle, you know. And I think that's okay. And that, in the purest sense of it, I don't do that much just pure styling now, but I think that fashion and clothes should make you feel the best version of yourself that day. It's really funny you saying wear black. I wouldn't say that's because you're chatting to a fashion stylist. I would say that's like a designer's comfort blanket, isn't it? You know, like, it's like you put all this colour on the page, and designers are always head to toe in black. Like, look, and I would turn up and think, oh, they look amazing. Why didn't I just do head to toe in black? So you always like.
I've just started having to wear glasses for close-up stuff.
But
And
how
I've got those
amazing!
like clear frame ones, and it kind of makes me look like a Scandinavian architect.
You do, you do
wish,
like a Scandinavian
I
architect.
kind of wish I'd them here, because
Yeah.
a friend of mine was like, "Oh, you can like gesture with them and
Yeah.
make points and stuff like that." And then I would have the whole.
Genuinely, I quite often put my glasses
digress.
on when I'm in a meeting with, you know, predominantly people I feel kind of vaguely scared of, because it makes me feel like I've got something to guard my face with, but also like an armoury. So I think you can really use clothes in that way. But yeah, going back to your point before, I think that it's a blessing and a curse that things are now instant. Yeah, I think it's amazing that we're flooded with all these ideas. I also think it puts a hell of a lot of pressure on people to be comparative, and I don't think that's where the best ideas come from. You know, like.
So just give us an insight into, in terms of the creative process as a stylist, what bit of that is instant, or how would you describe the instant version of that, as opposed to something more analog? You described it as more analog.
Well, ultimately, we are, whatever our output is, I guess most of us, we are looking to make someone feel something, aren't we? That's our end goal, isn't it? It's like you want someone to feel, and in a commercial sense, what the brief asks you to do, but in a personal sense and adding value, we try to deliver something that gives that a little bit more than they asked for, whether it's in a feeling or whether it's in a like, oh yeah, didn't think that. They won't register that bit of colour takes you back to that brand, or takes you back to that feeling, or takes you back to that place, but it does. And that's just kind of time and experience, and often we do it subliminally, and it's only then when we kind of break it down, it's only when you're trying to tell other people that you think, oh yeah, that's why you do that, and that's why you put it together like that. So from a styling point of view, I would start with a rule of 3. I'm actually, you know, in design, things like that, where I'm like, let's start with two main things, and then so like here, black, white, red, and you know, and or you go for the exact opposite, and I'm like, I'm going to put everything on the page, and then I'm going to strip a few things away, and that's that kind of Chanel thing, isn't it? Like, put everything on, then take your last 2 things off. So I think it works in fashion, it works in design, it works in film. It quite, you know, the elements there are never accidental, are they? It's like, and it's just as much about the things that you haven't done and the intentionally haven't done, like the white space or whatever negative that feeds into what you take home.
I'm interested in this analog instant thing as well, though, because anyone can throw a mood board together now. on Pinterest or something, can't they?
Yeah. Well,
Or a Google image search or something. Are you using those tools, or
yeah.
are you champion analog? Are you doing both?
I think you've got to do both.
Why is it different?
Yeah, you'd be mad not to use them because they're amazing tools to have. But really, like I was saying to you earlier, that the people that are inspiring me and the route I end up always taking is kind of going back to hard copies, and like I'm terrible on the printers, like enemy. I love having things physically out and playing with it and moving it around, and yeah, it might end up being the same things that you're seeing on the screen on Pinterest or Instagram or wherever, but just having it, that tactility, I think makes things completely different. I think it resonates completely differently in your idea, how your ideas play out, and things that you can add and subtract. And yeah, so I'm definitely an analog girl in that sense, but using the tools
give me a picture, because I'm quite visual.
Yeah.
Like, have we got a big table out? Is it all over the floor? Is it on the wall? Are we?
I mean, I think you know me too well. Like, it could be anywhere I am at that period in time. If organised cars, it's all on a table and it spills out, and whatever. The really organised cars, it starts on a wall and spreads out like that. The detective analogy is really good. Like, a detective now, I believe, not just in an ITV drama. I've got friends that are in the police. They put things on the wall, and when you keep coming back to stuff, your eye glances and it takes in new information, and you think about things in a different way. And that is the thing about getting it, on the table or on the wall for me. Like, you come back and you're like, no, I can strip that way. No, I want to add that in. And I think that's something you can't emulate on a computer, for me. In my creative process, I like to sort of feel things and move things around physically myself.
And which comes first for you? Is it the aesthetic or the
feeling,
the story?
Yeah.
Like, are you building
always
all storytellers?
Yeah, I think always the narrative and the feeling, and then working back from that. Like, okay, you've told me this character is going to be X, or this brand wants to, talk about what I think is going to be next year's trend, and I'm like, okay, well, how do we want to feel? It's no accident that Gatsby comes after the Great Depression, whatever, and it's the same cycles. Like, we've had a tough time, so we want to shove sequins on. Like, we've partied out, so now we want to go real stripped back and we want to wear block colour. That resonates in design, it resonates in film, it resonates in TV, and you see these cycles coming again and again, and it's all led by how you want people to feel.
Mm-hmm. Favourite part of the job? Like, where do you come? Which is the bit of all of that process, which is the bit where you come alive?
People on set. Like, I love the pre-prod. I love, as I've gone more into doing like creative direction treatments, all that sort of thing. I love all that, but I can see that also is like a nervous energy. I just love being on set. I love being surrounded by people, surrounding yourself by people that are better than you, just thriving off other people's ideas. And I love in the creative industries or in great teams anyway, whoever you are, whether you're the runner or the director, there's no hierarchy. I love that. I absolutely love that. I absolutely buzz off the person that comes in, like, completely fresh, and just feeds something in that you just wouldn't have got if they weren't there, or if they were being silenced or whatever. So yeah, I definitely come alive there, and more so than just on set. I come alive on location. I realised that I just like being out in the open and discovering new places. Well, yeah. or with Sean. I don't really like. I mean, I like being on set, but I love not having walls around me. So I just love being outside. So and weirdly, the whole travel thing, just like, I don't know if any of you are parents or whatever, but as you become an adult, the things that served you most become the things that don't serve you the most. So weirdly, all the massive travel things, which I love and hark back to, they became the things that became stripping of my enjoyment, because I want to be at home and I want to be grounded. So now, yeah, if I'm in Bradbury, that feeds me as much as if I'm in Barbados. If you're with the right people, it kind of doesn't really matter where you are.
Kind of don't believe you, but
I miss vitamin D. That's the only thing I miss. I'm like keeping the vitamin D sprays alive. But yeah, no.
Just a sad lamp and,
Yeah.
and Withenshaw. I've got everything I need.
Do you know what? That is the problem with talent. So many times where I remember one time we'd shot a TV commercial in Miami and basically the product wasn't ready. So we had to do some pickups and we chose Formby. And, you know, Kev, one of our photographers, you know, he's more like a dad than a colleague. He's too good. I was like, came away, and you shouldn't say this really because you should be like, the client's happy, we're happy. I was like, we're never going to go away with this client again. This looks incredible. Like, it made Formby Reads look like we could be anywhere in the world. And I was like, okay. But the realisation is, you know...
Did you like Photoshop some grey sky back in?
Yeah. I was like, yeah, we were really... Some clients as well have the look of the devil where it just shouldn't be possible, and then it's possible. But no, it's... I don't think you can emulate Amazing Light. We are so blessed. Like, people often said, you know, it's so ridiculous. Like, you know, and from an environmental point of view, there is conversations we've had, and actually the pandemic stimulated that, where you thought there is a lot more things you can do remotely, and actually, is there a necessity for me to go to Cape Town and do a shoot? There's amazing talent in Cape Town that can do it. And so sometimes to your own, like, fall or detriment, we've made the bigger choice that actually let's do that and feed it back in here. But I do still love going away, just not as much as I used to.
Well, maybe that segues into what's like a career highlight for you?
Kind of, it's twofold really. I think creating something with like my person, with my partner, and growing it from infancy like another child into, you know, we started off 3 of us, it was me, him and Gemma, and now there's like 30 of us. So to have grown tenfold in the same amount of years is something I feel really, really proud of, and really privileged to have been able to go on that journey with, and I couldn't have done it without the people, you know, like I've been lucky that we've come across some people that have really fed into our energy and have taken it in different directions. But also, yeah, the first part of my career, being able to be purist in the way I approached it and being able to call that work, like, you know, so many of my friends are doctors. We're literally not saving lives, are we? We're just not saving lives.
Nope.
At all. So to be able to turn up and do something you love and call it work just feels like, sometimes you've got, like, still have massive imposter syndrome. That was my last text message last night. You know, I used to do loads of stuff on screen, but I went to bed last night with total imposter syndrome, like, how can I go and talk to James? This feels like completely playing at it. It just, you know,
Quite a big deal.
But I think you are James, big.
Yeah.
But that's healthy. I think the imposter syndrome is healthy. I think the minute you go somewhere and you feel no nerves or you don't feel bothered, the passion's gone. Like, loads of people that talk to me about feeling like they feel like they're not good enough to do it, or that job's not for them, or I'm not a public speaker. And I'm like, we all are. It's just, it depends on the audience. It depends on the temperament. It depends on the topic. Like, there's no one that doesn't have a voice that can't be shared. Everybody's got like a story to tell, and we can all learn from each other.
I went to a talk on imposter syndrome once.
Did you?
Yeah, and it was like a business coach thing, and the first question from the floor at the end was, what if you actually are an imposter? I was like, that's brilliant, but it doesn't help me right now.
That is, I mean, I would be terrible on traitors. That's like, I'm too transparent. That is a big flaw of mine. Well, not, is it a flaw? I don't know. You go full circle with that, don't you?
Yeah, but you're right. You know, we're not saving lives. But back to that thing of like, we are doing that thing that's on us to do what we're born for. And I'm just so glad I didn't get accountancy or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
I think you'd have been good at it. You'd have brought charisma to accountancy.
Don't know.
I know some really
We're just
fun
lucky
accountants.
we get to do this, aren't we?
Yeah, we're so lucky. We are so lucky.
Converse to the career highlights, any stinkers?
Quite often I found the ones on paper that are the ones that everybody wants to look at, like this amazing campaign, that amazing campaign, this global campaign, are sometimes the hardest ones. Not really because of how the job played out, you know, but again, down to the people. Like, I'm a kind of leave egos at the door kind of girl, and I like teamwork. So the biggest stinkers for me have been where I've witnessed people not feeling comfortable because they'd been made to not feel comfortable. You know, like back in the day, photographers would like push the camera off the stand. This is where I get this worry that person might watch this and know that push just to test that their assistant had put it on the stand and then make them pay for the lens. You know, that kind of that ego driven industry was very prevalent for the first 10 years of my career, but I feel really lucky that I came in as just as digital was taking off. So I was doing loads of shoots. You know, we'd go away and you'd have to wait 3-4 days for the film to come back, which is incredible. I mean, now, like, what, the client wants it 5 minutes after you've shot it, don't they? But so having that kind of rest space, but then also being the first start of the first generation to go into digital, and being willing, able, and ready to give something a new energy, or work harder, basically. The egos, most of them melted away as we were told we had to work faster and harder. And then there's no room for it, really. So, yeah, I think I digressed then.
No, I think the point was the stinkers tend to be about who you're around.
Yeah, like you could be doing anyone. Yeah, I don't want to name names, but if the people like, you know, you could do a shoot with, for instance, like I do lots and lots and lots of sports stuff, like, so you can have all this crazy talent. I used to do loads of stuff with like Beckham, and then now, like, we're so lucky, aren't we, where we are, like I can go home and tuck my kids in bed and have worked with some of the biggest sports stars in the world because we happen to be in this industry and be near United or Liverpool or wherever. But you can work with these amazing, amazing people, right, at the top of the game. And 99% of them will be so humble, so ready just to come and do what we're there to do. And then I usually find it's the one, as you come down the ladder, it's the ones that as you come down the ladder that have got the ego that gets in the way of things flowing quite as smoothly as they could do. And that's where the stinkers come from. So it's normally middle management.
Mm. Yeah. The fashion industry has been kind of, you know, notorious for the kind of pressure to look a certain way, be a certain way. And, you know, I remember that growing up and the supermodels being put on front pages and commentary on how they looked and were they too fat, too thin, all this stuff. Is that still around? Is it better? Is it worse? Now we have filters and Instagram and everything. And also, how does that leak out into not just models, but, you know, do you feel a pressure to look a certain way, or how's it changed?
Honestly, old me, no. Like, I felt really I went into the industry, and lots of my counterparts maybe could have been models, or could have been, you know, they had amazing stature, amazing looks, or whatever. Without being self-deprecating, that was never on the table for me. So I kind of went in with like this kind of quite naive but privileged approach, where I wasn't massively affected by the pressure that was obviously on all those people, and I was really fortunate. Like, I used to do, and still do, lots of work with big plus size brands, which, you know, I'm not keen on that terminology. Just women that weren't waifs as we came out of the 90s. And that was a really amazing part of the industry to be in, because it celebrated beauty in lots of shapes and sizes. And it still was, you know, an ideology that is like, you know, it's not your everyday. They still are, for me, like Da Vinci works of art, aren't they? You know, like the otherworldly. But I wasn't ever really affected by that. I felt privileged that I could go and eat all the courses of food that I was having, and I didn't feel any pressure not to do that, and I'm happy to be 5'1", and, you know, so I felt really, I did witness lots and lots of people, both in crew and in cast, that found that difficult journey. But again, it's the people, some model agents were amazing at making girls feel like they needed to be healthy and strong and kind and articulate as as a starting point, and their beauty came secondary. Others, it was like they'd go in and they get measured. So again, it comes down to who you surround yourself by. As I've got older, weirdly, I said to you, like, as you feel more vulnerable, you recognise that those things creep in. So I look back with huge gratitude that old me didn't really feel vulnerable. I just kind of went in two-footed and gave it a go. So I never really worried about the fact that I didn't look like the model, because I didn't look like the model. You know, that just was, I knew I could help the model look the best she could look. So, yeah, I think my naivety served me well. But the comparative nature of social media, I think now I look at it with my parental head on. I find it difficult to self-regulate and to navigate it. So I'm not surprised that younger people do, or people that have never known a time before it. And I think that it is as much about putting it down, and it goes back to the ideas thing, putting it away and not being affected by what other people are doing, and thinking, right, what are we going to do? And yeah, that's the healthiest way, is just to take a break from it.
We were talking earlier, you said, you know, like we have this question that often gets, what would you tell your 21-year-old self, or something like that? You were like, I'd do the opposite.
Yeah, I would. I mean, both with myself and with my kids. I feel like when I'm struggling, like, so the last few years I've had little bouts of anxiety, but what I recognised was I'd never experienced that feeling until I was like late 30s, and I thought, how amazing. I felt so much gratitude, and so lucky to have never felt that before. So often when people are like, what would you tell your younger self? I'm like, actually, my younger self would be giving me a hype talk, because my younger self was fearless and was endlessly optimistic, endlessly enthusiastic, to a point of like distraction. She was really annoying, to be honest. But yeah, I use her and pull her back into the present day, because adulting's really hard, you know, like, and having the distractions of adulting is hard. So for me, remembering how quickly and easily things flowed with a purist, selfish approach, it kind of feeds me now.
You touched on that feeling of anxiety that you'd not experienced before. Does that, as a relatively new thing for you, and you've given me permission to be vulnerable and stuff, so where's that crept in from, and do you experience it in work? And I think, you know, often I've seen Kaz on shoots, and she is the life and soul. Like, she's the one the focal point, the kind of hype girl, to use your phrase. But with that, and I get it to some degree here. You know, the last few years for me have been up and down, but you try and show up at work with you know, I don't want to bring my stuff in. I don't necessarily want to, you know, you reap what you sow, don't you? Or whatever your version of that is, karma or anything else. You don't want to, you know, how many times have you sowed a bad attitude, and bad attitudes come back? So you become the focal point, knowingly or not knowingly. Do you feel then the pressure to almost fake it? And
Well, it's interesting.
I've asked you 10 questions in one
Yeah,
minute.
it is interesting, because kind of I don't know if it's self-fulfilling, but I could be super loud and can still be in those environments. And so I'm big in the background. That's why I'm good behind the camera. So I'm like, you know, I'm really happy to be loud and opinionated and whatever. And I'm less comfortable, what I've recognised, is being the focal point. So the analogy is a party. I'll be like the person that creates someone else's party. I don't want a party to be about me. And I think that feeds into, you know, the last couple of years, like domestically and other external factors, have meant that I've had these doubts about myself, and they've crept into how I approach things. But then nearly always work is like the counterpoint of that. Again, I feel really lucky. I can get on set, and whether it's because the day's so busy and that's therefore a distraction, or because you're surrounded by amazing people, that's my constant. Like, I feel really fortunate that I've had a very positive experience throughout, and I think some of that is self-fulfilling. Like, you know, the reason we start and end point of starting the agency was to surround ourselves with people that were like-minded, to champion each other, and to be in an environment where you don't feel like you're pitted against each other. That, you know, there's a healthy level of competition in what we do. That's the nature of a creative, and there's a healthy level of ego. But I think feeling like you've got a teammates is a really beautiful way to go through this industry. And that doesn't even mean you're in an agency, it just means you're a collaborative in the wider sense. And I think that no matter how I feel, like off camera or off set, 99% of the time, if you're surrounded by the right people, I feel calm at work. You know, our situation's slightly more complicated because myself and Sam started the agency together. We run it together, and we're also partners at home, and that is just like everything else. It's a blessing and a curse. You know, it's hard enough as a freelancer to try and put work down. It's doubly hard when it's at home as well. So we have over time put things in, and Sam's much better at that than me. He's much better at compartmentalising and putting things down, and it's definitely not a skill set. I'm still on a journey to learn when to put things down, but learning to take a bit of space from things when we can is the best way to thrive when you're in it, really. And recognising those anxiety feelings and thinking, you know, what, for me, to go faster, I have to slow down because I'm always at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I recognise that I'm forever telling, like, assistants or people coming through the ranks, like, you know, don't worry, when it feels panicky, just take a second, compose yourself, and then come back at it. And then I wasn't really heeding that advice myself. And that I recognised was, you know, to be able to move forward or to grow things, you just need to take stock and take time. So like last year was the first time, and again I feel so lucky in 20 years that I didn't hit the wall, but I felt like the wall was right there, and I thought, whoa, it's the first time ever I took a month off in the summer, and it was completely transformative. I mean, I took 4 weeks off, and 3 of those weeks were in hospital when I had my daughter, and then she came on set. She came all over the world with me. I was really, really lucky. And then my second one came along, and I was like, oh, that wasn't normal, because there's no way he'd stay quiet on set. But so a bit like the telling your younger self, my parenthood journey was the same. Like my second kid, I was like, okay, his nature, I mean, he's totally chill, but he's different to Coco. So it forced me to approach things in a more traditional way. So I took a bit more of a maternity per se. I mean, I was also running a kids business at the time, so which I took on as a maternity project, and then it did quite well. So that was kind of like a weird. I'm just not very good at doing nothing, but yeah, I guess the synopsis is you really should take space, but not all of us can find it.
But you do, you know, when you're, I know you say you don't want to be the focal point, but as a representative of other creators and on set, when it's your team and everyone looks at you,
Yeah.
There's, I think you know that idea of who gets access and what
we talked about that earlier, didn't we? Sorry to interrupt you. Like, I think that is a journey. Like, you know, a bit like friendships and relationships. And, you know, I had therapy sessions for the first time. It was amazing last year. Like, I mean, we talked about it in great depth. But
we both have therapists.
Yeah. So
very hello.
The Americans do really well. Like, I was like, wow, like you don't realise how much you've got, you know, triumph over adversity is great, but if you never revisit those traumas or things that have made you who you are, you don't really understand how to unlock different parts of yourself. The things that make you feel really good and those that serve you in terms of like help you grow should get the biggest portion of your time, and that's not the split that most of us do. Like, I am inherently a people pleaser. Like on set, it requires you to be a people pleaser because you're like, yeah, that's no problem. You know, the only time you say no is if it's got problem after it. Like, you don't, you know, you're saying yes all the time. But that means that quite often the people that shout loudest get the most attention. And what I've recognised is that in work and in externally, that certain things are really good for you and certain things can be a bit toxic, and it's okay to move away from the things that don't feel like they match your energy, because that doesn't make it bad environments or bad people. It just makes it not a marriage of your energy, and maybe that's best suited elsewhere. And sometimes you've got to cut that cord, or sometimes you've got to recognise that actually this isn't serving me anymore. I read a book by Elizabeth Day actually last year called Friendaholic. And, there's certain bits I didn't recognise, but lots of it I recognised. I'm like, I am friendaholic, like at work and at home. Like, I'm like, yeah. And I realise I'm in a tailspin. And I think, yeah, it's not normal to have like said yes to breakfast, said yes to lunch, said yes to picking up their kids, yes to the sleepover. But actually it is one of the things that serves you best as a creative, because you're like, okay, you want that brief yesterday? Yeah, no problem, we can do that yesterday. So kind of those things that are good in those situations, but recognising where things become a bit toxic is a journey I'm definitely still on. I've definitely not got to the destination on that, because like we've both discussed, people pleasing as a personality trait is a hard like cycle to break.
Any questions from the floor before we bring this into land?
I'm sorry if I missed it, but what's your company called?
It's called, sorry, that this is, so there we go.
That's my
No, it's not actually.
the introduction. But
This is why I'm a terrible businesswoman, and my partner is a much better business person. Like, he does all the hard work in terms of, like, I just turn up and chat. Like, we're called Me Agency, and our sister agency is called North Productions. So we are primarily artist management. That's what we started out at, and as we've grown to do also full service production. So for end-to-end creative treatments through to shoot production and post-production. And that the growth has come with the right people around us to be able to do that. So, but yeah, that's it. That should have been the start. So thank you very much. You've just made me do a synopsis.
If you want to connect on social, it's represented by .me.
Yeah, on Insta. Yeah.
Ronnie.
Hi.
Hello. Just on the bigger picture, industry-wise, do you see sustainability as a thing hitting your client groups at all? And how is that?
Yeah, but not as quickly as I think it should. Yeah, it's still, some clients are amazing. They were ahead of the curve and are ahead of the curve. Others, it feels like we're still teasing them there. And I think that is just out of, a lot of the time, it's out of old school strategy that exists in these bigger establishments, and that's harder to break down for them internally. And then we're lucky we can win as external voices, and we're really fortunate because we're not involved in any of the politics. We can say, right, we think we should be doing X, Y, and Z, but it takes them being on board from a boardroom down point of view. So it's a journey that's still there. So a lot of the mainstream it's in their strategy, but it's still only trickling through, I would say, realistically. Like, I think we're still on a journey for it not to be just a tick box. I think there's a lot further we can go. Like, we're constantly, the websites and the resurgence of vintage reuse, that kind of thing, it is now coming full circle, and that's really amazing to see. I think for me, the landscape hopefully in 5 years time is that every big brand should have a leg of that, where they're biting back their own product and they're reselling it, and that, I think that's a really nice way commercially of them still being able to own it and hold it, and it's just getting the infrastructure in place for that to be possible, because that the cycle has to start at the top, and if they're telling us to consume and consume and consume, and then that's part of what we do. Certainly, it's really interesting because the energies of clients I've put into has changed over the years because of that. Like, I feel less happy. Like me 10 years ago would have bought something new for today. Me today wears something that I've owned for, whatever, 6, 7, 8 years. It's not the feeling of consumption, I think, across the board is starting to harbour feelings of guilt, and it's about the brands taking hold of that and encouraging people to reuse and recycle. I actually took a marker pen to my daughter's gazelles yesterday, and they look brand new again. 2-minute stylist hack.
Make that real.
Yeah, I did. I did.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and I was like, I've literally bombed at this is the worst content I've ever done, but I was like, you know what? This took 2 minutes, and they look bloody Great. So yeah, I think practicing what you preach, we can encourage clients, and they are on a journey to go there. But sustainability, I think, should be in the forefront of everyone's conversation, and that is one of the few things the pandemic really. Whilst I miss being away 30, 40 weeks of the year, there was a realisation and a recognition that you don't need to send the same team everywhere. You can actually utilise pockets elsewhere and send it over. So that's one of the great things about like digital. Yeah. Hi.
I used to work internal for a retail brand, so I did photography management for fashion. When we were there, we obviously saw a lot of internal budget cuts, like it was getting worse and worse and worse. However, obviously the ask was still just as big as it ever was. Have you seen that yourself?
Yeah.
And how do you manage the level of, want versus the realism of the budget they actually give you to do that?
I am probably not the best person to speak to about this, because managing expectations, like I am always so endlessly optimistic. Again, my other half is much better at managing expectations, but in short answer, yes, absolutely. We're living and breathing it this week in a brief we've just landed, new client we've just landed, where both on our part and their part, the output we want, the budget just doesn't match that, and it just can't match that. So most of the ways we go about tackling that personally is about trying to take different creative approaches, about saying, okay, do you need, for argument's sake, 30 seconds of that, or 7 looks of that, or can we get the same message across with fewer, punchier approaches? So it's talking to them and saying, listen, really, what story are you, going back to stories rather than what are you trying to say and what are you trying to tell, and how can we do that in a way that serves your budget but also doesn't steal all the creativity, because that's the hardest challenge, isn't it? Like one client we've just got, I found myself saying to the client, the previous agency that had it, I said, their work is beautiful, but I can see the challenges they've faced in that the time pressures and the requirements have starved it of the energy it deserved. So actually really front loading the conversations where, what do you actually need? What stories you actually want to tell? And let's tell those stories first. All the rest are added value. I think is the best way to approach budget cuts, because you want to tell the story, even if it's shorter, and then add other bits rather than tell a terrible story that is 2 hours long. In fact, we were having that conversation about a really terrible movie we'd watched that had all the right actors in it and didn't. So that's the same analogy. Like, tell less and offer added value, but don't promise the world.
I think it buys you time, doesn't it? Often the money, like the budget.
Yeah, that is exactly what it buys you, isn't it?
And I think sometimes that when the time's so short, because everyone wants it tomorrow, you guys must feel this, because often you're on day rates and stuff, and they want to squeeze as much of that day out of it. It's you lose the ability to get stuff wrong and make mistakes, and I think that is such an important. So you have to get it right first time, otherwise there isn't enough time. We're working with a client at the moment where they have got budget, and we're committed to. We're still over delivering, but we've just. I'm looking at Chris, who's the guy rocking in the back. Because we literally scrapped 2 weeks worth of Chris's work an hour before the workshop with the client, because we'd realised we'd gone down a cul-de-sac. All that helped us develop something much better. But normally, these days, because of those pressures that you described, that opportunity is less and less. You just can't. You're sort of manoeuvring something that might not be best fit into something that's acceptable, and it becomes the enemy of creativity, I think, doesn't it?
And that thing that like what we do is so subjective, isn't it? There is no right or wrong, Like, I remember coming out of my A-levels, and my best mate, she was an amazing artist, and she didn't do great in our A-level exam. And I was thinking, why did I? And it's subjectivity. Like, I thought she was amazing. That examiner on that day didn't love her work, and that that is the other thing, that subjectivity kind of, you need that to be able to have debate, and the budget cuts strip that away, because you've not got the time for the conversations that, like you say, take you on this journey to another place. It ends up being a case of, we've got to get it right. But what is right? Like, we're creative, so what's right for you is completely wrong for someone else. And that's the kind of beauty of it, isn't it? It's the budget does allow that time to navigate, to get to what feels right, and what feels relevant, and feels like the right answer for them.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to ask you, what would you leave us with? What's your kind of encouragement, advice?
Just reach out to people, and remember that we're not, even if you're a freelancer on your own, we're not islands. Like, I started off the first half of my journey, I was a freelancer, and then the second half I'm, I guess, in people management in some way, shape or form. But I never felt like an island. Always felt like my happiness and my passion for this came from everybody that was around me. So, if you ever feel isolated, or if you ever feel like you're the only one going through something, or that everybody else got it, better or different or easy, just speak to each other, reach out. Like, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. I think that some of the most beautiful relationships I've made in business and at home have come from vulnerabilities and exposing below that surface level. Like, my Instagram is like, but it's also quite vulnerable, but it's also quite chaotic. It's just like a collection of me. Like we were saying about the baby book thing, you don't put those like crying moments in the baby book. And the same, like, don't be, if people are showing the highlights, it doesn't mean they're not on the same path as you, good or bad. So people, basically, that my only advice would be, reach out to the people. Like, we're all only as good as our weakest link, and our weakest link is probably amazing.
Would you thank Kaz?
Thanks for having me.
Brilliant story, and that you've just left us with is exactly what this is about.